Hey guys, good morning. Hope you all are fine. Today we are going to study a new topic called overhead cost control. To easily understand overheads, we must first understand the basic of cost. So, what is cost? A cost is the value of money that has been used to produce something or deliver a service. So, cost is an expense made to produce a product or to give a service. So, cost is an expenditure to make a product or a service. Clear? So, there are two types of cost. What are they? Direct cost and indirect cost. So, what does direct cost mean? Direct costs are costs which are directly involved in production, and indirect costs are costs which are not directly involved in production. So, direct costs are directly involved in production, like raw materials used for production, but indirect costs are not directly involved. For example, if a supervisor is supervising the production, so he is not directly involved in production, but he is supporting to the production process. So, first let us find out what is overhead, or let us know the meaning of overheads. According to ICMA London, overhead is an aggregate of indirect materials, indirect wages and indirect expenses. So, overhead is a collection or a basket of indirect materials, indirect wages and indirect expenses. It is collection or it is an aggregate or it is a complete collection of indirect wages, indirect expenses and indirect materials. Thus, overhead costs are those costs which cannot be charged to a particular job but can be apportioned on suitable basis. So, overhead cost cannot be apportioned to a particular job, cannot be assigned to a particular job, but we can apportion those costs. In short, overheads are all expenses other than direct expenses. So, other than direct expenses, what all expenses we make are overheads. But it is not directly involved in any production activity. So, examples to overheads. Indirect wages. So, indirect wages are paid to the laborers who are indirect employees or who are not directly involved in production process, like watchman, supervisor, etc. Next is factory power and light. So, these are supporting to production, but these are not directly involved in production. Next is store keeping expenses. So, expenses made to stock the raw materials. Next, repairs and maintenance of tools, machines, etc. Next, service charges, any service charges paid to help production, etc. Next, classification of overheads. So, overheads are classified into many different categories. Those are, so basically overheads are classified into three different sections. In those three different individual sections, again classification is made. First, let us look at what are those three main classifications. So, first one is functional classification. So, classification is made on the basis of functions of overheads. Next one is element wise. So, classification is made on the basis of elements or ingredients. Next is behavior. Classification on the basis of behavior. So, first we will take up functional. So, classification according to functions. So, what are those classifications? First one is production overhead. So, production overhead, it means direct expenses incurred in connection with production of goods and services. All the expenses made in connection to production of goods and services, but which are indirect to production, not directly involved in production. These are not directly contributing to make product to produce a product, but these are supporting expenses which are contributing to support the production process, such as lubricants. So, we use lubricants to machines, to lubricate machines or to enhance the performance of machines. Next, insurance. Excuse me. So next, insurance for plants and machinery. So insurance made in protection or to enhance the survival of plants and machinery. Next, store keeping expenses. Expenses made to stock the materials required in production, etc. Next is administration overhead. So what is administration? Administration is a process of managing or controlling of an undertaking. So any expenses or any expenditure made in connection with administration or management or control of an organization are known as administration overhead. So expenses made to manage or to control a activity or an organization. Example, management salary, salary paid to the management personnel. Audit fees, fees paid to the auditors. Next, charges of legal charges, postage charges, office rent, printing and stationery, etc. are administration overheads. Next is selling overhead. So what is selling? Selling is the process of making goods available to customers. So these are the expenditures incurred in promoting sales and to create and stimulate demand or securing orders. So it is a process of it is an expense made to promote sales or increase the level of sales or to attract customers, such as advertising expenses, salary or commission on sales, salary to salesmen, personnel, showroom expenses, etc. So next is distribution overhead. So these are the expenditures incurred for transfer of goods from one place to another. So expenditures made to transfer goods from one place to another place is known as distribution overhead. Example, carriage outward, transport, warehouse expenses, packaging expenses, etc. Next, the second category of classification, that is element wise classification. So under this, first one is indirect materials. What are indirect materials? Materials used as a part of production but are not directly traceable to a cost object are known as indirect materials. So indirect materials are used as a part of production, but those are not main materials or the main ingredients. Example, threads and buttons used in stitching cloths. So the main raw material here is cloth, but the supporting materials are indirect materials such as thread, buttons, etc. And lubricants used in maintenance of plants and machinery. So to operate smoothly, lubricants are used. The next is indirect labor. So indirect labor is any labor that supports the production process but is not directly involved in conversion of raw materials into finished goods. So these are not directly involved in conversion of raw materials into finished goods, but these are supporting employees or workers such as security guard. So security guard protects the building and the stock or the products, but he is not directly involved in producing any goods. Next is supervisor, who controls or manages the workers or any purchasing staff. Next, indirect expenses. Indirect expenses are those expenses that are incurred by the organization in order to run the business but not connected directly with production of any goods and services. So these are expenses incurred by the organization to run the business, to operate a business, but not to produce any product. Example, rents paid to the factories, postages, insurance, light, depreciation, and etc. Next is classification on the basis of behavior of material or overheads. First one is fixed overhead. So what is fixed overhead? Fixed overhead represents indirect cost which remains constant for a specific period regardless of changes in volume of production. So whatever may be the volume or quantity of production, but these costs remain fixed. They never change. Those costs are known as fixed overhead. The fixed overheads do not vary in total in a certain level of production. So fixed overhead does not vary, or it is not dynamic. So it is a stagnant. So never changes or never varies. Example, salaries and remuneration of management executives. So whatever may be the rate of production or whatever may be the profit, but the salaries and remuneration of management remains fixed. So it does not keep on changing. Next, legal fees, audit fees, etc. Next, variable overhead. Variable overhead is a portion of indirect cost which varies directly with change in the volume of production. So variable cost keeps on changing with changes in volume of production. If the volume of production increases, variable cost also changes, and if any change made in volume of production, variable cost also changes. Example, power, fuel, transport expenses, lubricants, tools and spares, etc. Thank you for watching. If you think this video is worth watching, then do like, share and subscribe, and we look forward to your suggestions. Thank you.